Hi, and welcome to Bush and Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're going to look at the event itself. In the last two short videos, we got a little bit of context going all the way back to U.S. policy in the late 1800s in the Spanish-American War, right up to the Cuban Revolution of 1959. And I would remind you that we looked at two things: the U-2 spy plane incident and the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1960 and 61, respectively. And we looked at how those two events really hurt the credibility of the United States for President Eisenhower and for President Kennedy, which means as we go into the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy's options are somewhat limited in terms of what the U.S. can do or say, and the Soviet Union will try to take advantage of that. So in the summer of 1962, after Fidel Castro had asked Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, for help, the U.S. notices they got help. They were getting help in the form of missiles being brought to Cuba, nuclear missiles. And of course, this is a huge concern for the United States. When these missiles were set up, they would be able to hit most American cities in at least the eastern half of the country. And so in October of 1962, President Kennedy speaks to the U.S. on TV as the situation's getting tougher and tougher. He had asked Nikita Khrushchev to remove the missiles, and Khrushchev said no, partially because he could throw up things like the Bay of Pigs and the U-2 spy plane incident as ways of saying you guys are playing kind of dirty and we're going to do the same. So Kennedy's left with a few options in October of 1962. One option is he could do nothing, let them put the missiles in and hope they never launch them. Another option is to bring the United Nations into this conflict. A third option is an airstrike on Cuba in hopes that they'll back off, or a full invasion, which would be an airstrike and sending troops in. Fifth option, though, is where Kennedy goes. He decides to blockade the Soviet ships that are bringing the missiles to Cuba. And in doing so, we're bringing ourselves really close to war. It's what we call brinkmanship, where you bring your enemy to the brink of war. And that's what Kennedy does. Some people say it's basically like a big game of chicken between Kennedy and Khrushchev. And Khrushchev actually backs off as a result of this. Now, part of that is, and the public saw that as the U.S., kind of trying to strong arm them back. But actually, we did make a deal with them behind closed doors that we would remove missiles from Turkey, which were in their backyard. And so, as a result of this, it was a tough time. About 2 weeks of people being very concerned about what was happening here. And it was really, in a lot of ways, the closest we came to war with the Soviet Union. But with that came an easing of tensions afterwards. For example, in 1963, the Soviet Union and the United States set up what's called the hotline, basically that they'll have direct communication between the White House and the Kremlin, so that if the Soviets are doing something, we can ask them directly, what is it you're doing? We don't understand. And eventually down the road, they would agree to some limited nuclear test ban treaties, particularly not testing in places like underwater or in space and so on. So it's important to understand there's a lot going on there as we're trying to see the U.S. contain communism, particularly in Cuba, which is very close. I always love this cartoon. It's one of my favorites that shows every president from Eisenhower through Bill Clinton when it was created. It was during the Clinton years. It actually goes beyond that to President George W. Bush, that we'll get rid of Castro any day. But the reality was that it would take quite a while for that to happen. So as you look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, just think of that idea of the Cold War having these times of intense tension. And we're going to look at times where that tension, the U.S. and the Soviet Union back off as well.